So for those of you who don't know me, I'm looking around, I think you all know me. My name's Emily. I'm one of the pastors on staff here at the church, and my job this morning is to catch up about our church. Caleb did a great job last week of kind of restarting these updates on our pastoral transition. We all know that David retires and transitions to a new role in the church at the end of July, which feels like tomorrow, but it's actually 2 months from now. And so we're restarting some updates. The last official update that we gave you was from David and Caleb back in September. And so what I'm going to do this morning is take us from September up to now so that we're in a position to be able to know what's been going on to start hearing about what's coming next in the coming weeks. So, I should use my clicker. I'm going to give a really quick summary. I know we sent an email this week with those updates from September to review, and I'm sure you all did that. But just in case there are a few of you who didn't get a chance to, I'm going to do a super quick summary of what was in that September update. The first thing is we are no longer functioning as a senior pastor-led church. We were founded as a senior pastor-led church about 30 years ago, David Stark. And Jesus has already transitioned us in the last few years to now a Pastoral Council-led church. Pastoral Council is myself, David Stark, Bill McKay, Caleb Chow, and the four of us hold the authority of the church together. Second point, we created a group called LSAT because we love acronyms here. And instead of recommending a new leadership structure or changes to our leadership structure, which was what the group was tasked with, God led the group in a different direction. And instead of recommending a structure, what God led us toward was recommending a new way of doing church, a new paradigm for how we do church. And it's summed up as pursuing God's will together. And I cannot tell you how much energy has gone into not building that into an acronym. PGWT was already scrapped, so you're welcome. Pursuing God's will together. We'll talk way more about that in the coming weeks too. And so for this, in the September update, we're talking about Pastoral Council is pursuing God's will together then for what comes next as a church. That brings us up to September. So September 2024, we have a visit with this guy. This is David Hughes. He's a retired minister, and he also works with Ruth Haley Barton's organization. It's called the Transforming Center. And what he does through the Transforming Center at this point is he helps churches transition to this way of doing church. And hold on, what else am I supposed to say about that? Yeah, so he comes for an in-person visit in September, and it's sort of like this intensive immersion into understanding, pursuing God's will together as a church. And so I just have a few bullet points. Like, what do we mean? Just briefly, what do we mean? Pursuing God's will together. Isn't that what we've always been doing? Well, yeah, and no. So what pursuing God's will together, what we're endeavoring to do is sort of what we've always done, but more. It's listening to Jesus together, which, as it turns out, is substantially different than listening to Jesus on our own and then coming and sharing that. A great deal more is required to come together in vulnerability and courage to hear him together, to position ourselves for Jesus to lead the church rather than one of us or even a group of us. It's a lot more that goes into that. Again, we'll talk about that a lot more. So many good things came out of that visit with him when he was here, not the least of which was much greater vulnerability with each other. Basically, Jesus forming us, the four of us, as a community that reflects more and more of Jesus together, not just as individuals. But what I want to focus on, one of the biggest things that came out of that time was Jesus clarifying for us our purpose and our calling as individuals within that purpose. So let me explain. In my next note sheet. Okay, so a bit of background here. Remember that the Pastoral Council has really, in the last several years, been through a transition from counseling the senior pastor to holding the authority together as a team. And so when I say that Jesus helped us clarify our purpose, it really wasn't like an obvious thing to be able to point to. And to kind of complicate things, Bill and Caleb and I had all joined the Pastoral Council at different points along this transition at different time periods. And so we each had kind of this different take of it also. So coming together and defining together what our purpose was first of all so helpful, because here is what emerged. It emerged that we actually had three main purposes as a pastoral council. And the first was sort of obvious, and we knew it already. We were holding the authority of the church together. The second was that as a team, we were also guiding the operations of the church together, running the church, doing the day-to-day stuff. What are we teaching on Sundays, and who's doing that, and who's in the booth, and what's going on in children's ministry, just all the daily, weekly, monthly things that go into running a church. We were doing all of that together. And then also the third thing was that we were transitioning the church to what comes next, hearing Jesus together for what comes next, and also taking those steps to bring that into the church. And I cannot tell you how much of a revelation this was. And I can speak, I think, only for myself. It put words and clarity to what I had been experiencing in that time, which was, this is too much. I can't do all of these things all at the same time. And it was my felt experience of we're trying to do all of these things together at the same time and kind of not doing any of them particularly effectively because we're trying to do too many things as a group. So where Jesus led us was to create some subgroups. Because also in this time period, as he's clarifying our purpose, he was also talking to each one of us individually. And I realized, just for my part, I was like, it always has felt super burdensome to me and anxiety inducing even to try to do this work on the transition and hear God for the transition while also doing all the day-to-day stuff running the church. And so I found really quickly, I don't think he's calling me to do that work. Actually, I think he's calling me to stay in this zone of just running the church and focusing on taking this new way of doing church and embedding it into the church we have now. And it really was helpful to me and gave me permission to not have to realize, I don't have to also work on this transition of what comes next, while also doing this work of running the church we have now. And so each one of us had our own revelations, and so we created two subgroups. So first of all, I have some lovely pictures of us so you can visualize who is on each group. So first of all, the Pastoral Council remains the Pastoral Council. We hold the authority of the church together. First subgroup that we created was the operations team, which is myself and Caleb. And we are now running the church together. And on things where we realize, you know what, this actually needs all four of us to be in on this, we bring it to Pastoral Council. But for the most part, Caleb and I oversee and are managing bringing this new way of church into what we're doing in our current church. And then we formed another team, the transition team. And that team is Bill and David and Caleb, and they're focusing on listening to Jesus together for what comes next. In the midst of this, through the wisdom of David Hughes, the pastor who's helping us, or the retired pastor who's helping us, he prompted us to consider inviting Danielle Strassner into the mix. And so around about December, January, we invite Danielle to do her own discerning. She does her own discerning. She knew we had already broken up into operations team, transition team. She knew the whole mix. So she does her own discerning. We come together and we all agree in unity. Yes, it is. Oh, hello. Go back. We lost Danielle's face. Can you go back to that slide. Danielle joins the transition team. And so she is now working, yep, thank you, yes. She is now on the team listening together to Jesus for what comes next as a church. Important to note, Danielle has not joined the Pastoral Council. Pastoral Council remains just the four of us. She is solely working on the transition team, which of course works with the Pastoral Council on occasion. Clear as mud? Yes. We'll send these slides out, and so you can see our lovely faces and where we each belong. And in the coming weeks, we will continue to, this brings us up to present, to what we've been doing up through now, and then we'll start talking about where we get next and what's going on.